My name is Anna Bengard, and the work that I've brought here or created here is this mural behind me, which was a site-specific piece, a collaborative piece with Superfly 1.3%, where he did most of the work. I just directed a little bit and brought him some fabric. And upstairs, there is also a painting that I completed last year, which also deals with the theme of bondage. Oh yeah, absolutely. Bondage is certainly a theme that's about connection and vulnerability and submission, but also strength, like the strength in submission, and also what you can attain through that. So similarly to like a dialogue over a piece of art in a place with someone you don't know, yeah, I would say there's some parallels. I feel like my sense of belonging is like ever changing and quite shifting and is very much about exploration. It's really humbling to like dig into cultures, getting to know people you haven't known before. Similarly with the whole bondage theme, that's not something that I was so familiar with in my teens, for instance. It's a subculture that I stumbled upon, that I explored, I'm still exploring, and it's about continuous learning and opening yourself up to these new experiences, asking questions and trying to understand them from different viewpoints. Yeah, I feel like art can be a site of opening borders, opening perspectives, exploration, particularly in like a context of a group exhibition where I think it has a lot of potential to be a site for like lots of different perspectives, different artists, different backgrounds, different viewpoints. No agenda, just a place of exploration and coming together to learn from one another. Yeah, so fetish club etiquette taught me the importance of tolerance, of respect, of setting, but also acknowledging boundaries. Not having to accept everything, but I think that's where tolerance comes in, kind of like live and let live. And I think these are quite important aspects for everyday living. I'm not saying like we should take fetish and put it out into the open. Like I've actually become quite critical of that, and I really question how much we fetishize everything, from how we obsess over objects or even sexuality, like in fashion, like a harness now comes from the fetish world, but is now quite accepted in the fashion world. And then I question, like, well, when that trickles into like young people or like young teens, like, I think there should be very clear boundaries, and yeah, it's also a form of mindfulness, having tolerance, understanding what is a fetish and what is sexual to you, and then being mindful of where you bring that. I think power dynamic plays into that as well, where you're just mindful of your surroundings and what you expose them to. And I feel also the other way around, that a lot of things are like fetishized, sexualized, that don't need to be. Something like a rope, for instance. Again, it comes down to like dialogue, introspection, thinking about things from different viewpoints and applying them to like different contexts, and also asking like what's appropriate. A lot of times things have been projected onto me, where I as an artist have been sexualized, and assumptions have been made. For instance, with the bondage thing, I've had several conversations where I'm not denying erotic appeal, and yes, there is like a heavy sexual components and cultures exploring that. but it doesn't have to just be that, me personally, I come at it from a different angle. Like, there does have to be the trust for me to allow someone to tie me up, because it's about that trust. Like, I don't want to be touched sexually in that instance, but I do want the intimacy, and I do want to be able to submit. I want to challenge my body to hold these difficult positions, and it is painful. And I compare it almost to like a runner's high. So there are different ways of coming at it, and I'm not doing it for the male gaze necessarily, or it's not just the male gaze, it's not just sexualization. That's why I was coming out with this with the piece behind me in the mural, where I'm just focusing on the face, and the body is not highlighted in this, so we're trying to desexualize it. Personal context, it does make them deeper, I feel, though it's quite a vulnerable thing when you're like putting these very deeply personal projects and ideas out into the wider world, because then they're open for interpretation, right? And they should be, and every viewer has their own take on it, but then it can be difficult when you get feedback from that and it's not what you intended, but it's how it comes across. It's also an interesting way to learn, and again, going back to the perspectives thing, gaining new knowledge on what other people perceive outside of your bubble, but it can sometimes be a little hard, because it makes you feel a bit misunderstood, which is fine, but it's something that you have to learn to deal with. But in creating the work and in creating the projects, it's usually a really beautiful connection that makes you stronger together. It really does make the process easier when you're working with people who you already have a connection with, because it's about sharing a vision, sharing a feeling. My muse, in its instance, we've worked together for over a decade now, and that's what makes her a muse, because she understands my vision to a point where she gives it something on top that elevates it to something much greater that I thought was possible of being. That's super enriching. That's what a muse is to me. But then it also goes, when I'm working with other people, it goes back to those things that I learned in fetish club etiquette, which is tolerance, respect, and understanding for that person and how they integrate into my vision, and communicating that clearly to make sure that they're also comfortable with that. I don't totally detach. I think from different angles when I'm trying to communicate to a wider public, or something like social media, or any other platform. Like, you can't get that emotional depth unless you're really sitting down having a really, really long one-to-one conversation, or in a small circle. But you can pick and choose aspects of what your process and your thinking was, and give that to the wider world in whatever format that may be, social media, an exhibition. You're never completely detached, you just repackage. Yes, absolutely. I've had moments where I later realized that the artwork I was producing, or what it turned out to be, was a form of self-interrogation. And that's a very vulnerable position to be in. And then, doing art is my job. I have to sell these pieces. I have to market myself. And then often you end up in these positions where you feel really vulnerable, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to share that work. You don't want to be seen. And that's really difficult. So then it's also a process of repackaging what that means to you, or what the artwork means to you, even if it was really intense, and you're actually displaying yourself as not a great person. It's where it's suddenly not about empowerment, and it's not something positive. It's difficult to market, but that's not what it's about at the end of the day. I guess visibility is always important, even when you don't really want to be visible. It's a way of existing in the world, and these spaces are important, just to allow people to see that. You know, they have a choice, they don't have to come in through these doors, but when they choose to, um, you know, take in different viewpoints, different visions. That's a really beautiful thing. And yeah, people should always have that choice. I've mainly like received pretty positive feedback. Working here was interesting because I mean the walls were pretty decrepit, and while I was working on it, I had to be really careful to not like crumble the wall, and it was quite challenging. Dropped my iPad from the ladder, so that was fun. But it was a nice learning process in that, just in terms of media, through the loss of my iPad, I had to do a bit more from imagination. Normally, I work a lot more from reference. Um, and it was also really, really lovely to work with Chandler Barnes, aka Superfly 1.3% again, in that he responded to my mural, and we had like a really nice day where we just experimented and played and created the installation. And yeah, that's my favorite way of working, is like having an organic flow and just doing it, just doing something, just making, just playing.